New Gen Gamers.
Still, at the same time, I'm trying to piece this one together, you know?
And the other
I have to
C
choose
the other
between
C
land and
vehicles kind of look like race cars.
Yeah. Where's that mothership at, too? What was up with that?
But we won't judge it. It's the olden days.
You know, this was back when
Things
Hunt for
did-
Red October came out, and also Star Wars.
It wasn't like today where players demand a contingent story and things to look like things. You just used your imagination back then. These game developers just thought up a crazy idea and made it. And
back then, the story was just a reason to play a game, not the whole point of it. Like, I think in some of the later consoles, we've gotten away from that a little bit, where story is more central than gameplay in some cases.
But still, another great port brought home, and this controller, as we said, is a limited play controller. You cannot sit here for hours and hours without getting a hand cramp, which none of the early consoles you really could. The Atari 2600, for how blocky and
that
outdated
was a boxy controller.
How outdated it would become. It was comfortable, though. You could play for a long period of time because you just kind of had your hand clenched, whereas with the Intellivision and the ColecoVision, you kind of had to have your hand at a weird angle. And the Atari 5200 and 7800 also had a similar control setup. They were trying to evolve the controller, but just kind of went in the wrong direction at that time. Compared to what would come out later, they kind of missed the mark.
Yeah, it wouldn't really get right until about the NES controller felt right, and even that was a little boxy with the square sides.
But at least you could hold both hands around it comfortably and play for long periods of time. As gamers, we demand to play for hours on end, even though a lot of these games are your arcade games, which kind of repeat after the first couple minutes. But still, if you want to go for that high score, you're going to be playing for a while. And
the Hubble!
The Hubble has flown past. Oh, he got bullseyed. Nice explosions.
Yeah, those
when
are
you
some
blow
pretty
up,
cool
though.
explosion effects there. Duck seems lost.
I'm trying to figure out if those are sharks or planes that have become sea-bound. I'm not sure what I'm shooting at there. Oh, game over. Snap.
I'm going to still stick with sea race cars.
That works for me. Oh, well, it's a quirky, and that's really fun, but as I said, I don't care much for the control. It kind of hurts my hand, but that's alright. You know, we were starting out of the gate, so...
You don't need a hand.
No. Chop it off and just make it.
Those are overrated.
Alright, let's check out our next game, guys.
Let's check out our next game, guys.
Hi everyone, we're going to look at another familiar title, another arcade classic, if you will, and another selling point of this system. What do you think this is, ladies and gentlemen? Well, what's the deal with Mario? That didn't look like Mario. That looks like the guy from that cartoon strip. Andy, what's his name?
Andy Dick?
Yeah, Andy Cap, or whatever that is.
Andy Dick's a cartoon character,
It's not even
I think.
Mario.
No, he looks like he's holding a boomerang or something, too.
And those are piranha plants or something. Those look more like the little alligators from Donkey Kong Country. But
So one thing we'll notice with this system is the arcade ports maybe graphically aren't 100%, but gameplay-wise, they did a really good job coding these that they feel and play like the arcade originals.
this almost is like a super deformed version of Donkey Kong Jr. or something. It's a really cutesy and more... Well, that's different. But anyhow, yeah, Mrs. Screener too, as Ray has just pointed out.
But this is the official version. Nintendo, up to this point, had not come to a home market. They'd released some of their own home console stuff over in Japan, but in America, the only thing they were known for were these arcade games.
These great arcade games, title after title that was released. You know, Nintendo after they hit Donkey Kong, they almost couldn't fail at that point. You know, anything that they touched was pretty much gold. And throughout the 80s and the early 90s, and even till today, I mean, Nintendo's had its rough points, but they're pretty much golden all the way. But I'm a Nintendo fanboy, so me and Ray are known as New Gen Gamers Nintendo fanboys, and Ray more so than me. But anyhow, as we were talking before in the game we played before about the controllers, I want to hit on something that I forgot to mention. We did play Slither with the ruler controller, but also the Super Action controller that was released. It was kind of like punching gloves. It kind of looked like that.
Or kind of like a gun. I think it was kind of released as to kind of almost looked like a toy. It was very different looking and definitely controlled differently than the traditional controller.
Yeah, and hopefully it did not hurt your hands the same way this does.
Yeah, unfortunately we don't have that one to try out.
Not as cool as the Power Glove, but I mean, I've seen pictures. It looks like it's pretty cool. You know, it's an interesting way to play, and probably would get you more into that boxing motion. You know, that more the jabbing type stuff. And
it had its own overlays. We look at the systems of this era all having the overlays for the controllers, which showed you which buttons to press on these numeric keypads that they had, and what was it called? The controller?
Oh, the
Super
Action controller.
The Super Action controller had its own overlays that were different size.
Action.
So on our intro, we show off one of those, and we couldn't figure out what it went to, but it's for that Super Action controller. Super Action controller.
Super Action controller.
Not just regular action, Super Action.
Listen, you can't own the Super Action controller without being super, though. And maybe we're not super enough to have one. I don't know.
I guess we're only super enough for the roller controller.
I guess. Well, it's still pretty badass. But let's get back to the Nintendo, the licensing issues, and an interesting story that goes with that. But they had this agreement with Nintendo. Now, when the Coleco decides to release the Atom computer peripheral, the Model 3, they're showing it off. This is where it kind of gets into the interesting story. They're showing off the Atom home computer at CES, and they're demonstrating what it can do, and they're using their version of Donkey Kong for the Atom computer. Now, at this point, Nintendo is in the midst of a deal making with Atari, because they want Atari to do all the promotion for the Famicom when it comes to America. They want them to take over from them.
The Famicom having been released in '83 in Japan.
That's right, and in '85 we eventually got it here.
But during this point, Nintendo didn't want to come to America themselves. They were looking for someone to distribute their hardware.
They really didn't think they could. You know, that's one of the things that Atari had cracked the market here. That was the household name. You know, we see these other systems, but when it comes down to it, Atari gets all the love. So Nintendo's trying to make this deal with Atari. Now, Atari at the time sees this Atom, the Coleco Atom, showing Donkey Kong, you know, and they're in the midst of making this deal. Well, they get a little bit pissy, we'll say. So they go to Nintendo. That's a nice way of putting it, I guess. They go to Nintendo and they start to delay this deal, you know. I'm not exactly sure what went on behind closed doors, but I'm sure there was a lot of cursing and swearing and what the hell is going on and blasphemy and such.
Especially with a language barrier between them. That can't make intense negotiations very easy.
I like to imagine it this way, you know, they're saying the worst things possible and their translators are trying to dull it down, you know, like, we won't go into details, but imagine that scene yourself and discuss.
Well, it also had a part to do with, Kassar was also on his way out of the company, and he was one of the main brokers of the deal.
Yes, and what we see is after this showing, you know, Atari being upset, it delays the deal long enough that he is out of the company by the time they would have made that.
Hey, that's Frogger!
Yeah, it's the official tabletop version of the arcade game.
It plays the same! Where'd you get it? Mr. Arcade is here! Galaxian, it's mine! Pac-Man!
You want to take it home?
Yeah! My own Pac-Man! Mr. Arcade, could you?
Donkey Kong?
Donkey Kong?
The official tabletop version.
Frogger, Donkey Kong, and Midway's Pac-Man and Galaxian. The arcade games you can take home with you from Coleco.
New Gen Gamers. Duck Wensel.